God morning, family. What a beautiful God-blessed day we have today. I'm so excited to have everyone here today. I'm so excited. We got sunshine, we got warmth, we got people running around in sandals and shorts. Okay? Now, I'm one who always says, I always say, you know what, we need to be blessed, feel blessed that we're alive today, right? And we do. But I got to tell you, there is a little extra pep in the step when you can wear sandals and shorts, right? So it's a beautiful, beautiful day. So many beautiful faces and hearts in here. Please join me as we go to our Father. Dear Lord, thank you so much for today. Thank you for this message. Thank you for this moment. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for everything, dear Lord. We would have nothing, be nothing, dear Lord, if it weren't for you. We wouldn't even have our breath if it weren't for you, dear Lord. And so we thank you so much for what you've done already in our lives today. And Lord, as you plant this seed, as this seed is placed within our heart, we ask that you would help us, Lord. Help us to do with this seed as you desire for us to. Not to squash this seed, not to throw it away, not to eat the seed, but to allow the seed to grow in the way that you desire for it to grow. And we just pray these things in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen. So, the shadow of the cross. Today we're going to talk about how the shadow of the cross casts shadow on our decisions. The decisions that we make. We're going to read from Matthew 27, and I messed up and I put down 1 through 25. It's actually verse 11 through 25. So Matthew 27, verse 11 through 25. It says, "Meanwhile, Jesus stood there before the governor, and the governor asked him, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'You have said so,' Jesus replied. When he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate asked him, 'Don't you hear the testimony they are bringing against you?' But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge. To the great amazement of the governor, now it was the governor's custom at the festival to release a prisoner chosen by the crowd. At that time, they had a well-known prisoner whose name was Jesus Barabbas. So when the crowd had gathered, Pilate asked them, which one do you want me to release to you? Jesus Barabbas or Jesus who is called the Messiah?' For he knew it was out of self-interest that they had handed over Jesus to him. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him a message. 'Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him.' But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus executed. 'Which of the two do you want me to release to you?' asked the governor. 'Barabbas,' they answered. 'What shall I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?' Pilate asked. They all answered, 'Crucify him.' 'Why? What crime has he committed?' asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, 'Crucify him!' When Pilate saw that he was getting nowhere, but that instead an uproar was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd. 'I am innocent of this man's blood,' he said. 'It is your responsibility.' All the people answered, 'His blood is on us and on our children.'" That's the word for today. Pilate spends this time with Jesus. After conversation, after questions, after accusations, after everything on this day, his time spending coming to know Jesus, coming to understand the situation, he understands that Jesus is innocent. He gets it. He knows the entire case that's been trumped up against Jesus is all because of envious, jealous hatred of the religious leaders, personal gain of the religious leaders. He knows that. He gets that. And so he continues to try, even after his wife's dream, where she says, don't convict this man, don't do this, have nothing to do with this. He's trying to make everyone happy. He's trying to let Jesus go, though, because he knows this man is innocent. But in order to maintain his place, his position, his influence, his wealth, his power over these people, he gives in. And instead of choosing innocence and justice and righteousness. Instead, he chooses the position and the power. See, the shadow of the cross exposes our motives and calls us to choose what is right. The shadow of the cross exposes our motives and calls us to choose what is right, even if it costs us our position and power. That's what the cross says we're to do. Everyone wants to succeed, don't we? I mean, I've never met anyone who doesn't. They go, hey, you know what? I just want to really suck in life. You know, I just really want to do as bad as I possibly can. You know, you don't hear people tell you that, do they? You don't go and start a business going, you know, I hope this sucker goes bankrupt within the first 6 months. You know, you just don't do it. You don't have someone go to college go, you know, I'm just hoping to flunk out by semester time. We don't do that, do we? Right? You don't have a mechanic fix the brakes in your car. Hopefully, you don't have a mechanic fix the brakes in your car and go, I hope them things let go before he gets home. You know, we don't want to fail. It's natural within us. It's in our heart, in our DNA. We want to succeed, right? And people want to succeed. I don't know anyone who started a life with Jesus thinking, you know what? I can't wait until I can betray him. I can't wait until I turn my back on him. We don't want to fail there either, do we? We want to succeed. We all want to succeed. It's just human nature. Okay? But we live in a world that makes it very difficult to succeed sometimes. Right? It seems like no matter what we do, we're walking down the path God's got in front of us, and someone puts a tree in the way. We're driving down the road trying to get to where we're going, and someone puts up a blockade. People will go out of their way sometimes because what you want to do, what you believe is right, where you're going, because that doesn't align with where they're going, they will literally, viciously, vindictively do everything they can to stop you from getting to where you're going. It's the world we live in. It happens all the time. We find that we're pressured. When we're pressured, the shadow of the cross will the shadow of the cross will expose where our heart's really at, where our decision really comes from. Is it coming from doing what's good for us, or is it coming from a decision that is right and righteous in God's eyes? The shadow of a cross will expose those each and every time. Of all the people at the crucifixion, of all the people in this whole system, the whole process, Pilate is probably the one we expect to betray Jesus more than anyone else. He's the one we least think will support Jesus. Why? Because of his power, his position, what he's doing, right? Because he believes in political expediency. And in order to have political expediency, well, you just got to do what the people want to do. And you just go on about your way. You maintain your power. You maintain your wealth. You maintain your status. So we expect that Pilate should be the one wanting to do that. And I would say that Pontius Pilate's presence in these events, though, is focused on a question that he asks. And it's an incredibly good question that he asks. He says, what should I do with Jesus? He asks the people, what should I do with Jesus? Because he knows he's innocent. And that's a question that each and every one of us needs to be asking ourselves daily. What should I do with Jesus? It goes back to the old WWJD, right? What would Jesus do? Got the wristband, got the shirt, got the bookmarker, got the poster, right? We need to actually ask, what should I do with Jesus? So often when we read the biblical narrative, when we're reading our Bible, we're looking for the good guy and the bad guy. Because there's always someone who's good and there's always someone who's evil and wicked, right? And for us as humans, that's good stuff, because then we know exactly what we're looking at. We don't have to make a decision because it's telling us. We always want someone in there that we can condemn, right? Because we got to know who we can condemn and who we can raise up, right? We got to know who the villain is and who the good guy is. We have to know this, right? We don't want to have to think about it. We're just like, oh, which one's the bad guy, right? Pilate doesn't really have a great reputation. He's not extremely esteemed. He is because of his position and power, because of where he's been placed, but Pilate isn't really looked on with a whole lot of favor. But the thing about it is, when we read about this crucifixion, about the railroading of Jesus, when we read this, we find that Pilate is not an evil person. He really isn't. If we look at it, we see that he's saying, he doesn't deny that Jesus is innocent. He knows Jesus is innocent. He tries to talk the crowd into the mob, into taking Jesus, right? So he can crucify Barabbas instead. He wants to let Jesus go free. If he was evil, he'd be like, you evil people want to take the innocent guy? Go for it. I don't care. I want my power, my position. I have no argument with this. If he was evil, he would have no struggle. He'd be like, go. I'll do it myself, except for you all got to say. So Pilate's not an evil person. He really isn't. Even though many people say, it's Pilate's fault. He should have. Well, he tried. But the religious leaders, I find it amazing. Pilate is defending the innocent. And the religious leaders are the ones who are acting evil and vindictive and trumping up charges against our Jesus and having him murdered. The religious leaders. Pilate has a lot of struggle with this decision as we look at this, right? He really struggles with the decision to release Barabbas instead of Jesus to the people. I want to share something with you. In 2018, Oprah interviewed some voters from the previous election, from the election of 2018, or the election of 2016, I mean. She interviewed this group of 14 people. There were 7 Democrats, 7 Republicans. They actually had gotten together the first time was during the election in 2016. These 14 people had come together. These 14 people, when Oprah interviewed them, they admitted that they had preconceived assumptions about the other person, about each and every other person. They had their judgment in place already about the other person just by their party affiliation when they met that first time. Now, the interesting thing is that after this, they started a private Facebook page. And the 14 of them got to start knowing each other, start communicating with each other. They actually got together and joined together and actually became friends by the time she had this interview with them 2 years later. They started sharing their lives and their struggles and their joys and everything with each other. And they discovered that even though they were on opposite sides of this political canyon, they weren't necessarily all that different from each other. They discovered they actually even liked each other when they got to know each other and when they accepted each other as people. They discovered that people can be a whole lot more complex than what we want them to be. And you don't have to, you look at Facebook for about 30 seconds. You want to see political division? It's there. You want to see human division? It's there. All over the place. It's so easy because we can go on. It's a Democrat. Oh, they're horrible. Oh, it's a Republican. Well, they're idiots. All we got to see is whether they're a donkey or an elephant, and we've already got our mind made up who they are. And it's all over Facebook all the time. We fail to see each other as people. What if in this world of political divisiveness that we have, what if we stopped treating each other poorly that disagrees with us? What if we stopped, instead of treating them like the enemy, we try to treat them like another human being? What if in this world that we live in where opinions are so powerful and so different, that we'd stop judging people by what party they're a part of? And it's not just a political party. Sometimes you're just from the other side of the track. These divisions aren't just political, but it's very hot right now, isn't it? In fact, it's been very hot for the last few years. Extremely hot. Question is, what if we treated others the way we wanted them to treat us? What if we'd start actually doing that? What if I treated you the way I want you to treat me? What if I gave you the chances I'm asking you to give me? What if I reflected Jesus to you like I want you to reflect Jesus to me? What if we started treating people that way? See, Pilate's interview brings out some of this. You see some of this coming through there, he's trying to treat Jesus like the man that he knows he is, the innocent person that he knows he is, that should be set free. Matthew 27, verse 14 says, "But Jesus made no reply, not even to a single charge, to the great amazement of the governor." Pilate's wavering, he's teetering, he's ready to release Jesus. But Jesus won't even defend himself. He says, "Well, you said." Or he just doesn't answer at all. He wants to release him, yet his mind's racing with this, how do I do this? How do I release this Jesus that they want to kill? How do I release him without me looking like the scapegoat, without me becoming the scapegoat, without me becoming in deeper water than where I'm already at? And so what Pilate does is the same thing that you and I do. We do it quite often. We're human. It happens. And there might be someone here who says, "Well, but I've never done it, but if I was a betting man, I would wager that you have at some point." He was looking for a way out, just like we are always looking for an easy way out. He was looking for a way. He wanted a way out. He wanted a way. He didn't have to make the decision. He didn't want to be the one responsible. He didn't want someone to come back and go, "Well, he did it." Finally, Pilate says, "I can't find anything wrong with this guy. Why do you want to kill him? Are you sure you want to kill him?" Right? And he backs up on his release of Jesus because the crowd is on the verge of a riot. They're on the verge of a riot. And so he says, "You know what?" He looks to his little mini-me, his little sidekick, and says, "You know what?" And I'm paraphrasing, okay? You won't find this in your Bible. "Who's the worst of the worst that we have in the prison?" And little mini-me is like, "Oh, that's got to be Jesus Barabbas. He's horrible. He kills people. He's murdered more than one person, and they really don't like him. And we could trade him off for Jesus of Bethlehem, Jesus the Messiah." And are you sure they hate him? And the little mini-me is like, "Oh yeah, they hate him. Bring him out." So he brings out Jesus Barabbas. Kind of interesting. They're both called Jesus, right? So he brings out this Jesus Barabbas, and he says, "All right, here's the deal. Every Passover, we pardon a Jewish prisoner. So here's the deal. We have Jesus Barabbas, who's a murderer, who, by the way, you wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley. By the way, you don't want to run into him one-on-one. By the way, you never want to make him a little bit upset. Don't walk on his grass because he's going to kill you, because he's that kind of guy. We have Jesus Barabbas, and we have Jesus the Messiah, the King of the Jews. You're Jews, by the way, just so you know, right? That's kind of where he's at. He's at this point where I got this murderer everyone should want gone, and I got this guy who's innocent. Who do you want? And what do they say? Give us Barabbas. What about Jesus? Crucify him. What about Jesus? Crucify him. What about Jesus? Crucify him. We want to free the murderer instead of the innocent guy because we have our political reasons. We have our personal vendetta. Pilate thinks he's a genius because he thinks, I've got this way out. They're going to pick Barabbas. And it blows up in his face. Eventually, the crowd actually, John 19:12 says, if you let, the crowd tells Pilate, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. Remember, Jesus was called King of the Jews. Anyone who claims to be a king is no friend of Caesar. They oppose Caesar, right? So now Pilate's kind of like, because, let me give you a little background on Pilate. Pilate was appointed governor of Judea by Tiberius in AD 26. Okay, immediately after becoming governor of Judea, Pilate moves the military headquarters from Caesarea to Israel, to Jerusalem, excuse me. So he moves it immediately, and what he does is all of his soldiers come walking through town with their standards that have Caesar's face on them. This idol that the Romans, or this ruler that the Romans idolize. And they take and they stand all these standards. They put all these standards out in the lot around the new military compound, which is near the temple. So all these Jewish people who only worship God are looking at the God of the Romans. And they had a fit. And they said they'd rather die than allow that to happen. And eventually Caesar said, get them things down. Get them standards out of there. So Pilate sends them back to Caesarea. Okay? Now, there's a couple other things. Pilate drove the Jews to insurrection one other time when he hung up gold shields all around the palace. These gold shields had engraved on them the names of all these Roman deities, which is the little g gods, the man-made ones. Again, the Jewish people are like, we're not looking at this. This is on Mount Zion. You're not leaving that there. And and eventually he had to take those down as well to prevent riots, right? The third time was when he took the money from the Jewish temple. He was going to take their finances from the temple and use them to build an aqueduct for the Roman army, for the Roman people. Technically, it would have helped the Jewish people out too. But the ones who really would have gained from it is the Romans. They were going to take the money from the church to build the aqueduct. And the Jewish people rose up once again. Were extremely irate. It got so bad that he actually sent his soldiers out in civilian clothes with clubs underneath their cloaks. And at a certain given point in time, a signal was given and they pulled their clubs out and they started beating the civilians, the rioters, and killed many of them. If you read Luke tells us that Pilate slaughtered some Galileans while they were sacrificing in a temple. Pilate's on some thin ice with Caesar. Pilate's about wrecked everything Caesar wanted with the Jewish people. On multiple occasions, he's on his last leg. So you can imagine how Pilate doesn't really want to give up an innocent guy and then have them Jewish leaders go, look, Caesar, this is what Pilate did. He's trying not to be the blame for it. But they're not having it. So he had to choose. Does he do what is right in the face of the consequences, or does he do what's wrong and reap the rewards? Does he do what's right, release Jesus, take a chance at Caesar coming down, maybe even killing him, if it causes the riot that he believes it's going to because they're already starting? Or does he do the wrong thing and say, all right, we'll kill him. We'll let this one go. We'll let the murderer go. We'll kill him. And I'll stay in my position, and I'll still have my power, and I'll still have my wealth, and I'll still have my head. So he has to choose it. Obviously, he chooses the latter. And then afterwards, he says, okay, that's what we're going to do, and then he does something else that you and I do. We shift the blame. See, he says, okay, fine. You got him. We'll crucify him. We'll give you this one. and he has that basin of water, and he symbolically washes his hands, says, not on me, it's on all you. He shifts the blame. He blames them for it. He's the one who made the decision. He's the one who ultimately had the choice. He shifts the blame and blames it on them. And when he says his death is on your heads, the people are like, that's fine. Put it on the heads of our kids too, because apparently we don't love them either, right? You know, condemn us. It's fine. We want him dead. Now, I don't know if Pilate really feels any better about this whole thing, just trying to appease the people kind of thing. You probably have had it in your life, haven't you? Where you tried to appease people, it's like, oh, it doesn't work sometimes, right? It reminds me a lot of what he did. He condemns Jesus. Jesus is going to be crucified, and then he says, oh, it's your fault. It kind of reminds me of the husband who beats his wife. You know, he goes, he gets mad, he beats her. And then afterwards he says, well, it's your fault. You made me mad. It's your fault you do stuff that I don't like. It's your fault. And he blames her instead of taking the heat on himself for his own being responsible for his own actions. Now, it might seem like that's kind of far-fetched, but I don't think it is. I think it's very similar. See, the thing is he doesn't want to be accountable for his choices, but yet each and every one of us is accountable for our choices. We're each accountable for our own choice. We have choices to make. God gives us choices. He gives us opportunities. We are responsible for our choices. And if we make the wrong choice, we make the wrong choice. And if we make the wrong choice for the right reason, or the right choice for the wrong reason. Right? We want to make the right choice for the right reason. No matter what choice we make, it's our choice. And we're responsible. And we will answer for it. Now, Jesus came to reconcile God with his creation, right? And Pilate ends up in the middle of this story. Pilate ends up there, and he didn't want to be there. I mean, who would want to be there? Pilate isn't a pawn of God. There are people who say, well, God just used Pilate. Pilate had a choice. Just like you and I have a choice. I can choose to do what God asked me to do, or I can refuse to do what God asked me to do. Pilate was more a pawn of Satan than he was God. God gave Pilate multiple opportunities. He gave him multiple opportunities. And God provides us with opportunities as well. There's always an opportunity. He will never put anything before us and never allow anything before us that he does not give us an out for. Right? When we look back on things that we did, and it's like, oh, that was ugly. I did not do that very well. God has always given us, when you look at it with open, honest eyes, there's always been the opportunity. You've had a choice. You could have done things differently, yet we chose to do it the way we did. And I used to blame my temper. Not my fault. I got a bad temper. Whose temper is it? Whose fault is it? Whose choice is it? You know those moments when you got that anger welling up? You're loading up both barrels. It's like, I'm going to let them have it. You women are just mean to us guys that way. But, thank you, at least one person's laughing. And it's female, so it's good. So, no. But really, you're loading up. You're just angry. You're just like, oh. And yet, all of a sudden, there's a train. Stops you. You got to wait. Oh, now I got to simmer down, right? Or the phone rings. You got to take a phone call right in the heat of the moment. Right? The kid comes in screaming because they're bleeding. You got to take them to the hospital, get stitches or something, right? There's those opportunities for you to cool down. There's opportunities for you to hear that small voice whispering in your ear saying, you sure you want to say that way? You sure you want to do what you think you were going to do? Is there maybe a better way to do that? Right? God gives us opportunities. And sometimes we just see it as, it's in my way. Train's here, and I'm going to sit here and stew for 10 minutes while I'm waiting for the train to go by, right? But we had a choice. We had an opportunity. If we would be quiet and listen to the Lord whisper in our ear, we'd know he's saying, hey, why don't we try this instead? You know why we continue to do things that are for us? You know why we follow our little idols? Why we raise them up instead? It's easier. It's easier. It makes our life easier. Everything's good. Doesn't maybe make the spouse easier to get along with, but but for us, it's a matter of, it makes life easier for us. Our decision is easier because, well, it just seemed right in the moment. Russian philosopher Dostoevsky said, without God, everything is possible. What he means by that is when it comes to making a decision, if we don't bring God into that decision, it's easy. I'll do what I want. I'll make my choice. It'll be my decision. Instead of, this is what I want to do, but there's this little voice keeps going in my ear, right? Wanting me to do the right thing. If I ignore the voice, if I ignore the Spirit leading me, if I ignore God's word, my choices are easier because they're just mine. You might not like the results all the time, but the choice at the moment of choice is easier. People talk about how it's faith is a crutch. I don't know if you've ever had anyone tell you that, but I've had people tell me, oh, it's just a crutch. You just lean on faith. It's just, you can blame everything on your faith, and it's, oh, you did it because of your faith. And they make out like it makes life easier to have faith. I like what author Flannery O'Connor said. She said, what people don't realize is how much religion costs. They think faith is a big electric blanket, when of course it is the cross. If our faith is in Jesus Christ, if our faith says to follow Jesus Christ, that means we do what Jesus Christ did, and he sacrificed himself on the cross, and he also picks up his cross daily, as we're called to do. Everyone thinks that, oh, you could just, I shouldn't say everyone, those condescending ones think that, oh, it's just so nice. And the electric blanket she's talking about, the big warm fuzzy, it makes me feel good. I feel good when I do this. Oh, I could say it's because of Jesus, that's why. And they act like that's some big warm fuzzy. The reality is, if we're actually following Jesus, if we're doing what we're called to do, we're picking up that cross, and that cross is going to be on his shoulder. You know what? They're heavy. They got sharp edges. They're rugged. It's a brutal trip. It's not for the faint of heart. That cross is not warm and fuzzy. The other thing about the cost of the cross is sometimes we choose the path of least resistance because we can see good coming from it. Pilate did this. Think about this. Pilate's thinking, how do I keep these people from revolting again? He had to be feeling a little bit like God, didn't he? I mean, time after time, we're in the wilderness. Oh, now they're finally behaving. The generation's dead. Let's go. Now they're not behaving in the promised land. You know what I mean? Over and over and over again. Oh, they brought us out of Egypt. Why didn't you just leave us in Egypt? Right? We've had this battle. God's had this battle forever. Pilate's got to be feeling a little bit of that. He might not have realized it, but he has to be feeling a little bit of the tension that God has with the Israelites. Because these people, every time he turns around, they're mad about something. Right? So he's trying to ease the pain, the stress, the upset, so he doesn't have another riot on his hands. See, when there's a riot, what happens? People fight, right? That's when the clubs come out, the swords come out, the spears. People die. So he's thinking, wouldn't it be better? I know he's innocent. This is me thinking first, okay? So that's not in the Bible either, okay? He's thinking, isn't it easier for one innocent person to die than hundreds or thousands, even though they may be guilty, of convicting the innocent, then if I don't crucify him, there's going to be riots. There will be riots like before. There will be hundreds or thousands of people killed like before. Isn't it worth sacrificing one for the good of the masses? That's what I'm talking about when I say we sometimes choose the path of least resistance because we can see good coming from it. Sometimes our most difficult struggle is the choice of doing good versus doing what's right. And we have to remember that. Right is righteous. That's what we're talking about. Is it right in the sight of God? It's a whole lot easier doing, well, it'd be good for the family, it'd be good for this, it'd be good for that, it'd be good for the next thing. What's the Bible say about what you're going to do? What's the Bible say about what you're thinking? What's the Bible say about what you're saying? Is it righteous? There's a whole lot of good people aren't going to be in heaven, folks. Jesus didn't come so we'd be good. He came so we'd be righteous. That we would follow him and do the right or righteous thing. Do what he does. Not come and just be good for our buddies. Not come so we do good stuff so we don't ruffle any feathers. That's not what it's about. That's why I've said over and over again, there are probably more people in church that are going to hell than there are that are going to heaven. Because churches continue to tickle ears. They continue to put on that little warm, fuzzy electric blanket instead of showing people the cross. We don't have to go looking very hard to find out where their sacrifice is at. We're to sacrifice. We're to take advantage of the opportunities God puts in front of us. We're to follow through on those opportunities. We're to do the right thing, the righteous thing. We don't have to look far. It happens each and every day. I guarantee you, every day. It's not an hour from now, there's a car with a flat tire and you stop. Pastor was saying we're supposed to do good things for people. We're supposed to be doing the righteous thing. We're supposed to love our neighbor. And so I'm going to stop and give them a lift or change their tire. But an hour later, we're saying, oh, that's too bad. They're broke down. It's not that. It's not about coming here for an hour. It's about doing the right thing all the time. And are we going to get it right every time? No. We're still human. But we have to be following Jesus if we're going to try to do the right thing. Those opportunities are there over and over again. But if I stop and help them, I'm going to be 5 minutes late for lunch. Well, but it might be, I'm pretty sure they got a chainsaw in the trunk. They're going to just cut me up if I stop and help them. Right? I mean, we talk ourselves out of things. We give ourselves excuses why we don't do things. I just don't have to. There's no way. If I do, I'm going to miss the first 5 minutes of my show if I stop. We get so wrapped up in ourselves and what we want. And, oh, the family will be upset if I'm 5 minutes late for lunch. I would like to think that your family would be glad that you stopped and helped the little old lady with the flat tire. I would like to think that that your family's happy that you got her safely on her way. That you did what Jesus would have done. But then again, we shift our blame. Well, it's not my fault. It was the little old lady's fault I'm late. I can't stop because my family will be upset. We convince ourselves there are times more important than others are, that our money is more important than others are, that our energy is more important than others are. And yet Jesus came for those who were in need. He came for the sick. He came for the lost. He came for those who were in need. Galatians 5:24 says, those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Pilate's afraid to risk his political appointment. He's afraid to risk his power, his money, his position, and maybe even his life. What he can't see, though, is that in the shadow of the cross, all of those worldly rewards have no appeal compared to the eternal rewards. That if we do the right thing versus the good thing. Philippians 2, 5 through 11, if you read that, I'm not going to read all of it, but if you read that, Paul talks about that we're to keep in mind that Jesus is exalted. He's exalted because he was unwilling to let holding on to his position and power. He's at the right hand of the Father. And we're down here being spoiled brats. And he said, I love him so much, I'm going to go down and do it anyway. I'm going to leave my position. I'm going to go down. I'm going to let him spit on me. I'm going to let him call me names. I'm going to let him call me a liar. I'm going to let him betray me. I'm going to let him butcher me and then kill me. I'm going to let him do that because he was willing to not worry about his position. He came down to defeat the grave, to defeat death for you and for me because we were down here not being able to behave by any stretch of the imagination. Couldn't kill enough animals to get us into heaven. Couldn't sacrifice enough for us to make it to heaven. Yet Jesus said, you know what, I love them. And I don't want even one to go to hell. So I'm going to go down. I'm leaving my throne. I'm going to go down. I'm going to sacrifice myself for them. In the shadow of the cross, we'll see the silhouette of Christ. In the shadow of the cross, we see the silhouette of Christ. If we're looking at our lives, if we're doing the things that we're to do, when the shadow of the cross is cast upon them, it'll be a righteous thing and it'll be Christ-like. Jesus suffered his torture and death. Not that men would not suffer. That's a lie that people tell us. That's a lie that we believe. It's not. He did not suffer the torture and death he suffered so that we would not suffer. Rather that our sufferings would be like his when we pick up our cross daily. Pilate asked the question. And we need to be asking ourselves the same question. What shall we do with Jesus? What shall we do with Jesus? And I would say even more so, what will you do with Jesus? Please join me as we go to our Father. Dear Lord, thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for this minute. Thank you for this moment, this message, dear Lord. Lord, some of this is kind of hard to hear. Some of us, we're kind of like squirming in our seats, right? Some of us are like, I don't like hearing that. And I get it because I don't like hearing it. Lord, help us to understand, though, that it's your gospel, it's your word, it's your message. Help us to remember that the reality of it is, it doesn't matter how good we are. If we're not righteous, that's where the problem's at. There are going to be a whole lot of people, Lord, that are in heaven that we're going to see them and we're going to be like, they made it? And you'll say, yeah, because they were righteous. And we're going to be looking for people and we're going to be like, where's Bob at? Where's Joe at? And Lord, you're going to say, well, good isn't righteous. Lord, help us to be righteous. Help us to be righteous. And when we're in the shadow of the cross, help it to be revealed that we were your children. We were devoted to you and we were following your Son. Father, we pray these things in your Son, Jesus Christ's name.